Outside the city wall, a dark mass of man-eater tribe warriors dawdled. Reluctant to advance, truth be told, the stuff they carried didn't look like war gear. More like picnic supplies. Take their bows for instance. Out of 1,200 plus people, maybe half could actually draw a bow. And the quality, utterly atrocious, numerically. They outnumbered the Hanyang garrison. Alright, but when it came to arrow reserves, they were light years behind. Each of them had maybe 20 or 30 arrows at most. And what kind of arrows were they? A few feathers glued to the shaft was a luxury. Arrowheads, sharpened, chartwood that barely did the trick. If the arrow shaft was straight, you'd have to burn incense in gratitude. Frankly, they were using the primitive bows you invented way back when there was no metal. You could only sharpen wood and glue dinobird feathers to the shaft. Now, these guys are on par with your initial skill level. The pot calling the kettle black, hilarious, isn't it? And look at those giant apes below the city. That dude who failed to jump the wall last time, still not giving up, is back, this time. He retreated a good distance, mustered all his strength, and jumped again. Release the arrows, roared Doer. Shoosh, shoosh, shoosh. 5 arrows flew straight toward the giant ape. Thud, thud, thud. 5 dull thuds, every arrow hit its mark, all hitting the chest. 2 of them pierced right through, giving it a cool heart, cool body. Holy smokes. This was close-range shooting. The crenellation was only 7 meters high. And the giant ape jumped to a height of 5 meters. The actual shooting distance was at most 3 or 4 meters. At the power of the standard issue longbow and the sharp bronze arrowhead, and piercing the giant ape's thick body was a piece of cake. The poor giant ape let out a miserable cry, and before it even touched the city wall, it fell into the moat, struggled a few times, snapped off an arrow shaft, and then kicked the bucket. A string of bubbles rose from the water, tinged with blood, instantly staining the area red. The piranhas in the moat went wild. They swarmed over, smelling the scent, and frantically devoured the giant ape's corpse. This sudden turn of events stunned the enemy troops below the city. Even the other red-haired giant apes stared blankly at the red war, utterly dumbfounded. Dahan is mighty. Dahan will prevail. The garrison on the city wall was greatly encouraged, and the cheers shook the sky. Listen to that. How inspiring. The archers who shot down the giant ape instantly became heroes. Surrounded by everyone, accepting praise, the cheers from the city wall also woke up the enemy. To giant ape's roar, in grief Fan jumped into the moat, driving away the piranhas, and worked together to drag their companion's body out of the water, even getting injured by some of the big fish that wouldn't let go. Those 2 giant apes were ruthless enough, grabbing the big fish and throwing them at the city wall. Fortunately, the warriors were agile and dodged them all. The other giant apes wailed around the corpse, some even pulling out the arrows and snapping them in half. The way they looked, they wished they could tear the Han tribe people to pieces. Seeing their companion's tragic state, the giant apes went completely berserk and started running under the city wall, dreaming of flying up to the city wall and hacking those ape-murdering killers to death. Ying Rui and Dur quickly directed the archers to prepare. Just as the giant apes leapt again, arrows rained down. Thud, thud, thud. Another burst of dull thuds. This time, more than 20 giant apes who charged together were all hit by arrows and fell into the water. Some died on the spot, others struggled in pain. The scene was truly tragic. The Han tribe's arrows all had barbs. When they were pulled out, it was excruciatingly painful, tearing off a large piece of flesh. And the blood flowed endlessly, but you couldn't be bothered to pity them. Who told them to attack Hanyang City? This was asking for it. In this round of fighting, the giant apes suffered another crushing defeat, suffering heavy losses, and finally calmed down, no longer daring to stupidly climb the wall. But they didn't give up their attack. More than 600 archers gathered 20 meters below the city wall and started shooting at the city head. The arrows flew towards Hanyang City's head. But how powerful could these crude things be? The bow body was thick at both ends and thin in the middle. It would be a miracle if the arrows flew straight. Clang-clang sounds can be heard without stop. Some of the arrows couldn't even make it over the city wall. They crashed right on it. Some of them did fly over the city head, shot inside the city. But the warriors on the city wall had already hidden behind the crenellations. Unscathed, 600 man-eater tribe archers fired 7 or 8 rounds. With no success, the captains leading the teams called a stop. After all, there weren't many arrows. Only 20 or 30 for each person. They couldn't waste them like that. You need to know, arrows are like modern ammunition. Even more valuable than ammunition. In ancient times, swords could be used by the people. But bows and arrows, long spears, were under government control. You can see how important they are. The enemy's arrows were useless, and the warriors at the city had cheered and their morale soared. On the enemy's side, some were dejected, some were furious, and of course, some were more intelligent. They knew that the quality of their bows and arrows was not good, so they adopted a more primitive attack strategy. Someone shouted something loudly. And then they saw a large group of people leaving the group and heading straight to the river. They weren't interested in the wild grass like rice. They saw a road in the middle and took that road to the river. After all, the rice fields were all mud. No one wanted to walk in that weedy, muddy ground. Several hundred people ran to the river and soon ran back, each carrying a few cobblestones, and finally piled them up under the city wall. Those red-haired giant apes' eyes lit up when they saw the stones. And without saying a word, they picked up one and threw it at the figures on the city wall. Ying Rui had just poked his head out to look down when suddenly a dark shadow came at him, scaring him so much that he quickly retracted his neck. With a loud crash, a fist-sized cobblestone hit the corner of the crenellation and bounced back into the moat. Inspired, the other giant apes and totem warriors didn't waste any time and picked up stones and threw them at the city wall. In an instant, hundreds and thousands of cobblestones rained down. The warriors squatting under the crenellations curled up on the ground, covered their heads, and screamed. Many of them were injured. Quickly evacuate the city wall. Everyone off the city wall. Leave a few people in the city tower fort. The others get down quickly. Ying Rui also covered his head and plunged into the city tower fort. The other warriors heard the shout and quickly retreated from the city wall. Some were hit twice while retreating, wincing in pain, and finally ran to the bottom of the city wall, sticking close to the inner city wall to avoid the flying stones. The elder and the rat shaman, who were standing inside the city gate, were also startled by this scene. The elder thought for a moment and immediately said, "Go to the woodworking workshop and see. I remember there should still be a lot of spare shields. Those were prepared by the chief for expanding the army. Bring all those shields over. If that doesn't work, get some wooden boards. As long as they can block the stones." Duer's eyes lit up when he heard this, and without saying a word, he ran towards the woodworking factory, and the other warriors followed behind him. The rain of stones didn't last long and soon stopped. After all, the number of stones they brought back from the river each time was limited. They could only throw a few rounds before running out of ammunition. Just as they ran to the river again to pick up stones, Duer and the others also brought back a lot of shields and wooden boards from the woodworking workshop. And a group of people ran to the city head again. The warriors who were injured just now were arranged to go to the military camp warehouse for treatment. Seeing dozens of injured people come down, the snake tribe leader quickly ran to the rat shaman and the elder to ask for herbs and tools, preparing to have his tribesmen treat the injured. The snake tribe was good at healing and treating diseases, and they also sold a lot of herbs to the Han tribe in daily transactions, and now it came in handy. The elder was very happy to hear this and personally led the snake leader to get the things. A few minutes later, the second round of stone attacks began. But the warriors on the city wall were prepared in advance. Some people held a shield alone, and others held a wooden board together. The clanging sound of flying stones hitting the wooden boards was endless. But this time no one was injured. The morale that had fallen just now due to being hit was up again. Ying Rui even more arrogantly stood up a huge wooden board and stabbed it in the gap in the crenellation, just to show off to the enemies below. "I have a shield. You can't do anything to me." Such provocations soon worked. Just now, hearing the screams of those who were hit on the city wall, the totem warriors below were excited. After trying so many ways, they finally had a trick to deal with them. So they threw even harder. But after throwing only a few rounds, those soldiers on top with tied-up hair had a countermeasure. Watching that guy on the city wall with a silver tin crown, hiding behind a large wooden board, looking at them with a sneer. The totem warriors below lost the motivation to continue throwing. Only those unwilling man-eater apes picked up stones and threw them specifically at Ying Rui's wooden board. The giant apes were powerful, and the wooden board banged loudly. Even knocking Ying Rui back a few steps, Ying Rui no longer resisted. And after being hit by a dozen flying stones, he hid under the crenellation again. After this stone attack ended, the man-eater tribe totem warriors were completely helpless. A group of people circled the city wall a few times, but couldn't find any weaknesses to attack. Finally, they had no choice but to confront the Hanyang City garrison. Blocking the first city gates, let's see what you do. You can't not eat or drink, can you? If you don't come out to hunt, you'll starve to death. Let's see if you come out. It's normal for them to have such thoughts. They haven't been inside Hanyang City. Who knows what it's like inside? They wouldn't know what those people in the city eat, and thought they were like them. Hunting every day. The battle slowed down a bit. Ying Rui inspected the first city walls and shook his head helplessly when he saw that the first city gates were blocked. Even if they had the ability to fight out, Luo Chong had already ordered them not to go out of the city to meet the enemy. Besides, if they really fought out, the Han tribe would definitely have casualties. Maybe that's what the chief thought. Otherwise, why wouldn't he let them counterattack? So the two sides were at a stalemate, and the rat shaman also ordered people to collect the stones that had flown in and sent them back to the city wall. Now they didn't even have to pick up stones themselves. They could just keep them to hit the enemies below. The siege of Hanyang City was at a standstill. Luo Chong was still marching non-stop at this speed. It would take at least 2 days to reach the slope at the tolling ridge, but on the way, Luo Chong wasn't idle. He kept up with the situation in Hanyang City. As soon as the man-eater tribe totem army stopped, the rat shaman had Bazooka send a beast skin letter, briefly explaining the battle situation and finally asking what to do next. You took the beast skin letter and pondered what to pay attention to next while riding on Grey Mountain's back. Chief, what does the letter say? Is Hanyang City okay? Rat Da asked. Riding his warhorse, looking up, you curled your lips. It's okay. Our city has high walls and deep moats. What are those man-eater tribes people? Don't even mention them. Give you 1,000 of our warriors, and you might not be able to take Hanyang City. You continued. The enemy sent giant apes to climb the city wall, but none of them could climb up, and our warriors killed a lot of them. They also fired a few rounds of arrows, but the arrows were of poor quality and the quantity was pitiful. But they also have smart people who picked up stones from the river and threw them at the city wall, injuring some tribesmen. Fortunately, no one was killed, just minor injuries. And they've been treated. Oh, good that no one died. Hehe. As long as they don't leave, we'll be successful. And we can wipe them all out, Rapdah said with a sinister smile. Yeah, good to have confidence. It's almost noon. Let's find a place to rest, eat, and then go. We don't need to rush now. Yes, Chief. This general obeys, Rapdah shouted in a melodramatic tone. Everyone quickly found a place to stop, some cooked, some relieved themselves. And you took the opportunity to write a reply to the rat shaman and the others. Your letter has been received, you are doing well. Be sure to ensure the safety of the tribesmen, and treat the injured quickly. You continued to write. Try to attract the enemy to the west city gate. Don't let them get too close to the rice fields, lest they destroy the rice and cause a reduction in production. Don't easily kill the enemy, just hold them back. I already have a plan. I plan to capture these enemies alive. They will all be our slaves in the future. Kill as few as possible, and keep them to work. After writing, you had Bazooka send the reply back in the next 2 days. The man-eater tribe totem army was still at a stalemate with Hanyang City. They sent most of their forces to guard the first city gates, and sent the rest to the mountains to collect firewood and hunt. You also laid the team from elsewhere and sneaked across the west bank of the small river. You didn't dare to take the bridge, for fear of running into the man-eater tribe, which would ruin the surprise attack, so they took a big detour and quietly approached the tolling ridge slope, just as you were leading the team to march stealthily. In these days, the tribes who came to participate in the Hanyang City April market also sent trading teams to Hanyang City one after another. As a result, on the way, they ran into the man-eater tribe warriors hunting in the mountains. The mountains around Hanyang City, because of the rise of the Han tribe, have been hunted for a long time, and wild animals dare not come. The man-eater tribe hunters were worried that they couldn't find prey, and these trading teams came to their door. They wouldn't think there was anything abnormal about this. Eating people was what they were best at, and running into them this time was bad luck for those people. Fortunately, most of the people who came to Hanyang City for trade were the strongest warriors in their respective tribes. And plus there weren't many man-eater tribe hunters. Mostly small groups acting, so even if some people were captured or killed, some could always escape. After all, they often came to the Han tribe for trade, and they had already thoroughly explored the terrain along the way, and they could find their way back with their eyes closed. In this way, before your side could go to rescue them, most of them had already shaken off their pursuers and were huddling in the mountains, not knowing what to do. A day passed and your team finally arrived at Tolling Ridge. You ran into a few foreign warriors who had been separated because of their escape. Great leader of the Han tribe, please help us. Several of our tribesmen have been captured by those totem warriors. They may still be alive. We hope that the Han leader can lead troops to reinforce and rescue our captured tribesmen. A man who looked very down and out pleaded to you. This guy was from the Feishi tribe. 15 people came out together this time, but at most 6 or 7 escaped. And they were scattered, in the end, only to meet you. Yes. Yes. Please help us, leader of the Han tribe. Our Cha tribe also has tribesmen who have been captured by the enemy. The Han tribe is powerful and has sophisticated weapons. We implore the leader of the Han tribe to send troops to help us regain the captured tribesmen. Or it may be too late. A short man from the Cha tribe knelt in front of you and said, "You guys stand up and talk first. It's not that I don't want to help you, but the number of enemies is too large. You may not have reached the vicinity of Hanyang City, and you don't understand the current situation. The man-eater tribe army is attacking, and there are more than 1-0 male totem warriors who have already surrounded the 4 city gates of Hanyang City. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to sneak here to think of ideas." You first rejected their plea and then stated the current crisis of Hanyang City. The number of enemies was too great compared to your side, and it was difficult to even protect yourselves, let alone take care of others. So that's how it is. Even Hanyang City has been surrounded by them, the short Cha tribe man said, in surprise. Then, I don't know what ideas the Han tribe leader has come up with. The short man from the Cha tribe looked surprised. 1 or 2,000 people. Do you Han tribe have that many people outside Hanyang City? Of course not. Most of our tribesmen are trapped inside the city, and we're all that's outside. Seeing the disappointed looks on their faces, you paused and came up with an idea. But it's not like there's no way. You want to save your tribesmen, and we want to save our tribesmen. We have the same goal. Besides, which of your tribes doesn't have relatives in Hanyang City? This isn't just a matter for one tribe. Everyone has to face it together. If each tribe sends 100 or so people, won't we be able to gather 1 or 2,000? Then what are we afraid of? You started to sweet talk. Even the warriors beside you were tempted. After all, many of them were bought from various tribes, and it's only been a little over a year. How could they have forgotten their old homes? As for the strategic goal, the warriors below didn't know. They only knew that Hanyang City was surrounded by man-eater tribes people, and the chief led them to rescue it, but there were too many enemies. So they had to find reinforcements from the surrounding tribes. The matter of annexation was only known to you and the 3 highest-ranking officers. However, it didn't matter if you told these warriors. If they were provided with food and clothing, wouldn't they want their former tribesmen to live a good life too? The 2 men from the Cha tribe and Feishi tribe nodded repeatedly. What you said made sense. If there weren't enough people, everyone should pool together. Han tribe leader, you're right, but our 2 tribes can gather at most 200 or 300 people, which is still less than them. The short man worried. Well, 3 tribes aren't enough, but I can get other tribes to send people. The Jianzhou tribe and the Snake tribe have also suffered. The Snake tribe people are now trapped in Hanyang City, and there are still 3 people from the Jianzhou tribe in the city. I can get them out and let them go back to call for people that can also gather 100 or 2. Other tribes should come too. You analyzed. The man from the Feishi tribe raised another difficulty. But our tribe is too far away. It will take too long to go back and forth. That's easy, we have horses. We have cavalry. I'll send cavalry to send you back. Also, this time we send troops. The Han tribe will give generous rewards. Although it's everyone's business, in theory. It's difficult for your tribe to send so many people all at once. This way, you go back and tell your leaders that I invited all the leaders to bring people to reinforce, to jointly fight the enemy, and after the war, the Han tribe will give generous rewards. I can reveal in advance that we have recently discovered a good place. Fertile land, flat terrain, and abundant water. There's a lot of good land for growing food. Enough to support 100 tribes as big as us. As long as your leaders bring warriors, I am willing to share this place with you. Of course, if you don't want this place, that's fine. Our Han tribe has other things. As long as they are willing to face the common enemy, the warriors of our Han tribe are willing to take the lead and rush to the front of the team. Tell your leaders this. You drew a big cake with impassioned words. Fertile land, of course there is, in this era. Any piece of land is fertile. It hasn't been developed at all. But if they want it, the land can't be moved. They can only move there themselves. When the time comes to develop the land, they will still have to do it themselves. To put it bluntly, you're still tricking them into going there to work. What the Han leader said is true. Is it really as good as you said? Several people were obviously moved by your words. To put it bluntly, they were still greedy for the cake you painted. Of course, it's true. I am the leader of a large tribe of several thousand people, with countless good things. Why would I trick you over this little thing? Just say what I said. I guarantee I will do what I say. You said with a nonchalant expression. Then we will go back to call for people now. I hope the Han leader can send someone to send us. Otherwise I'm afraid it will be too late. No problem. You waved your hand and shouted to the back. Where is the cavalry commander Chai Duodwo? Quickly go and select the cavalry under your command. Find 2 warriors from the same tribe as them, 1 person with 2 horses. Send them back to their tribe to call for people. Chai Duodwo ran over, lifted his armor, and knelt on one knee. This general obeys. Go. Tell the warriors to pay attention to safety and return quickly. You waved your hand. The several men from the Cha tribe and Feishi tribe quickly follow. Soon, several people rode away. Their tribes weren't close to Hanyang City. It would take several days, but it was faster on horseback. They could get there in a day. The speed of calling for reinforcements was still very fast. After arranging these, you sent a flying letter to Hanyang City, asking them to airlift the 3 people from the Zhanjiao tribe out with giant eagles, and then also send cavalry to send them back to call for people, and paint the big cake you had drawn before for them again. While you were making arrangements for calling for reinforcements, Ratda led the sword and shield soldiers and archers to spread out, with a small flag of 12 people as a combat unit, wandering in the forests in the northwest and southwest directions, receiving the remnants of the defeated troops who had been defeated by the man-eater tribe's people, and then bringing them back, reasoning with them, moving them with emotion, drawing a big cake, and then sending cavalry to send them back to report the news. On April 1st, at the beginning of summer, it should have been the day of the Han tribe's market, but it was ruined by the enemy's siege. Those tribes who arrived as scheduled were naturally beaten up by the enemy. Fortunately, they were rescued by the elite warriors of the Han tribe, who barely managed to save a few people. Then, these people were sent back to their tribes to call for reinforcements. Riding a horse was fast. They specifically chose small roads and shortcuts. They left that day and arrived that day. The leaders of the various tribes received this good news at the first time. The night was dark, and 2 round moons hung in the sky. In the Cha tribe's residence, the leader, who was nearly 30 years old, held a bowl of white rice and looked at the 2 people in front of him. One was a subordinate who had been sent to the market to purchase, and the other was a Han tribe cavalryman wearing a red robe and black armor, who was also a tribesman of the Cha tribe before. What did you say? Hanyang City was surrounded by more than 1,000 enemies, and they also captured our people. Yes. So the leader of the Han tribe asked us to come back to report the news, wanting the leader to lead the warriors to support, and promised to give generous rewards. The short man quickly repeated your words. The Cha leader frowned, and looked at the Han tribe cavalrymen. "Leader, that's what our Han leader said." "I can testify." The cavalryman immediately understood and opened his mouth to testify. "You haven't eaten yet, have you? Come on, serve food. You eat first. I'll think about this matter." The Cha leader said with a frown. This matter wasn't so simple. It was true that the tribesmen had been captured, but there were less than 10 people in total for the Cha tribe, which had a total population of over 400. It was nothing at all. Wouldn't it be alright to just pretend that these 10 people were gone? Did they really have to use the strength of the entire tribe to help you fight? Besides those benefits you mentioned, having a good place to cultivate, being able to support hundreds of thousands of people. But how to use it? If you wanted the land, you had to move the entire tribe over. It wasn't something you could just say and do. But you also said that if they weren't willing to move there, they would give other things as rewards. But you didn't say what to give or how much. This was completely an empty check. But what if they didn't go? According to the news, Hanyang City hadn't been broken yet. It was just blocked inside, and according to this cavalryman, there were plenty of food and livestock in Hanyang City. They weren't lacking anything to eat. If they really dragged it out, who knew who would starve to death first? So the question was, if the Han tribe survived this calamity and recover, would they retaliate against these tribes who didn't help? You had to know that the Han tribe's population was more than 10 people. It would be easy to eat a small tribe like them. There was another more important question. If the Han tribe lost, it would definitely be the end of them. Where would they buy white salt in the future? To put it another way, if the Han tribe won, and didn't come to attack them afterwards, but the relationship broke down and they terminated the trade in the future, then they still wouldn't be able to eat white salt. This was very likely. If I needed help and you didn't come after promising rewards, then why would I still sell you things? If I were the leader of the Han tribe, I would probably do the same thing. After thinking for a long time, the Cha leader sighed. If they didn't send troops, they couldn't accept any of the results. Then they had no choice but to send troops. He was being forced. The two soldiers finished the rice in their bowls and stared at the Cha leader, hoping to get an answer. After all, their tribesmen were still waiting to be rescued. Our Cha tribe is friends with the Han tribe. Now the enemy has surrounded Hanyang City and captured our people. That is our common enemy. Since they are enemies, then there's nothing to say. You will definitely send troops. Immediately gather the tribesmen. I want to select 120 people and set off tomorrow at dawn. The Cha leader turned around, looked at the eager eyes of the two, and shouted loudly with righteous indignation, since they had already decided to go. Might as well make the words sound nice and try to get more benefits, right? No need to put on a stinky face. And this could also be considered a justified reason for sending troops, to let the tribesmen understand why they were going to war. In this way, the Cha tribe selected warriors that night, 100 men and 20 women, making a total of 120 people, preparing to set off early tomorrow morning. That night, most of the other tribes who received the news were the same. Those who could become leaders, elders, or shamans were not fools. They were all wise men in their tribes. Their thoughts were similar to the Cha leaders. They were also being forced. On April 2nd, the second day of early summer, dozens of tribes who had traded with the Han tribe sent out warriors. Some, like the Jianzhou tribe, had a total population of nearly 600. And this time they directly sent out 150 people, which was most of the tribe's fighting power. The other tribes also had many people, more than 100 in some cases, and 40 or 50 in others. There were also some small tribes with a total population of only 100, who were almost moving out their entire tribe. There were also some small tribes of 50 or 60 people, who even brought their breastfeeding children, making it look like they were moving. For these small tribes, maybe this was an opportunity. The Han tribe had discovered a good place again and agreed to share it with them. Sharing was definitely out of the question, but maybe they could directly join the Han tribe. So wouldn't those good things be given to them for free? A large number of warriors were gathering towards you. However, some tribes were closer and arrived at the gathering place the evening of the day after they set off. Looking at the densely packed totem warriors blocking the city gate, You didn't directly order an attack. The man-eater tribe warriors often sent small teams into the surrounding mountains to hunt for food. You glanced at the warriors, who were not yet numerous, and an idea struck you. You immediately told them about a reward mission: capture an enemy and send them to you, and you will give them 2 large bowls of white salt. The warriors who arrived early were stunned. They didn't expect such a good thing. So these people immediately went out separately, preparing to hunt down these white salt who rashly entered the forest. Ow. No. The enemies. You were crouching in the mountains outside Hanyang City, watching that group of man-eater tribe totem warriors. 40 guys, tracking cattle footprints. TSK. Enough for them to have a meal. On the other side, a dozen Han tribe brothers were riding cattle, deliberately wandering around Hanyang City. Their goal was to lure these man-eater tribes people into our ambush. The 2 groups were getting farther and farther apart. Getting closer and closer to the ambush, you chuckled inwardly. The show was about to begin. In the mountain valley, 200-odd brothers were ambushed tightly, in the trees, in the bushes, and lying in the grass pretending to be landmines. Everyone held their breath, not moving at all, this time. The people were quite mixed. Red-robed and black-armored Han tribe warriors, and reinforcements from other tribes dressed in leaf suits. You specifically instructed them to try to capture them alive. The reason being to exchange hostages in the future. In case we couldn't win, we could use the prisoners to exchange for our people. Those reinforcements from other tribes didn't care so much. They only cared about one condition: 1 prisoner for each person captured, to exchange for salt in the end. This was much more cost-effective than using manpower to exchange for salt in their own tribes. The opposing sides, 1 in front and 1 behind, quickly entered the ambush. The brothers riding the cattle quickly got off the cattle, hid the livestock, and found a place to lie down, waiting for the enemy to walk into the net. That team of man-eater tribe warriors, following the cattle hoof prints all the way, arrived at the mountain valley not long after. As a result, they found that the cattle hoof prints suddenly became messy, and some human footprints emerged around them. The leading captain was dumbfounded. Did someone get there first? That these footprints didn't look like human footprints. After all, the soles of the Han tribe's military boots were carved with non-slip patterns from hardwood. Except for the different sizes, they all looked the same. The man-eater tribe's people had never seen such footprints before, and couldn't figure out the situation for a while before they could figure it out. More than 100 people suddenly emerged from around them, yelling and screaming, and surrounded them. The man-eater tribe warriors were startled. These guys in front of them were dressed so strangely. Red robes and red pants, black armor all over their bodies, only revealing their faces. The weapons in their hands were also exquisitely crafted, completely incomparable to their bone spears and bone spears. However, they had also seen the world, and their on-the-spot adaptability was first class. The 40 people immediately formed a circle back-to-back. The ones with wooden shields stood on the outside, holding a shield in one hand and a spear in the other. The others without shields also raised their bone spears high, resting them on the heads of the shield soldiers. Han, Han, Han. The warriors shouted slogans in unison, approaching step by step, the encirclement getting smaller and smaller. The Han tribe's sword and shield soldiers drew their long knives, holding a shield in one hand and a knife in the other. With each step they took, they tapped the shield with the knife. Before they even started, the man-eater tribe's people were already terrified by the military might, and some were so nervous that they wiped their bodies, directly smearing their white totems. More than 100 sword and shield soldiers, spearmen, miscellaneous reinforcements, and archers, holding their respective weapons, approached step by step, and soon surrounded the enemy tightly. The miscellaneous reinforcements mostly held newly cut wooden sticks this time. The archers didn't hold bows and arrows, but held a military shovel in one hand and a wooden stick in the other. Their task was to capture prisoners. As soon as the encirclement narrowed, everyone stopped, and the slogan stopped abruptly. The scene instantly quieted down. The atmosphere was so oppressive that people couldn't breathe. The man-eater tribe's totem warriors were also dumbfounded, not understanding what these strange-looking guys were trying to do, surrounding them but not attacking. Just then, A loud bandit whistle suddenly sounded in the mountain valley, echoing endlessly. Immediately afterwards, in the opposite direction from where the man-eater tribe warriors came, there was a rumbling sound, like rolling thunder. From far to near, at a very fast speed, all the man-eater tribe warriors looked over there. The next scene was unforgettable for them. Only 38 fine steeds, either red or black, carrying 38 red-robed and black-armored warriors, charged towards the encirclement. They leaned forward, clinging tightly to the backs of the horses, holding the reins in one hand, and holding a 4-meter-long lance horizontally in the other. The tip of the spear flashed with cold light, rumbling towards this side, with no intention of stopping at all, disperse on both flanks. Standing outside the encirclement, holding the Da Han flag, Rat Da ordered loudly. The warriors in the encirclement heard the order and immediately made a passage, and the cavalry rumbled towards the enemy in the encirclement. Originally, the man-eater tribe totem warriors were attacked from both sides, so they automatically formed a circle and formed a ring-shaped formation, hoping to resist attacks from all directions, but now it was impossible. Seeing the warriors riding 4-legged beasts getting closer and closer, no one dared to stand in front of the cold lances. They didn't care about the formation, and ran away in all directions. The cavalry quickly rushed into the encirclement. Some man-eater tribe warriors couldn't dodge in time, and were directly pierced through the body by a spear hanging on the spear shaft, and were carried by the horse for a long distance, dead beyond death. The effect of the cavalry charge was good. The ring-shaped defense originally condensed by the enemy was broken at once. The warriors in the outer encirclement took advantage of the enemy's great chaos and launched a fatal blow. Brothers, charge! Nearly 200 warriors rushed towards the 30-odd scattered remnants of the enemy. As soon as they made contact, there were several screams, and a fierce battle broke out instantly. Shield crashed against shield. The Han tribe brothers, their feet firmly planted in anti-slip cowhide military boots, the elite selected from over 4,000 warriors, endurance, speed, combat skills, and strength, all top-notch, in a single clash. They toppled the gross-sandaled enemies, the heavy shield slamming down, knocking them senseless. Some enemies, in their death throes, attempted a desperate counterattack, trying to drag someone down with their bone spears, but the shield-wielding infantry blocked them with their shields, twisting and turning, long knives slashing down, splintering the wooden shafted spears into pieces. Then, a kick sent the enemy sprawling, and a ragtag reinforcement, wielding a club, rushed out, swinging it down on the enemy's back, instantly dazing him. The Han tribe spearmen were no slouches either. Not only were their formations impeccable, but their close-quarters combat skills were directly inherited from Luo Chong's teachings. Spearmen and enemy lawn spearmen charged at each other, both thrusting simultaneously. The Han tribe spearmen's spears were longer, a good 3.5 meters, significantly outranging the enemy's bone spears, giving them the initiative. But because you wanted prisoners, they refrained from lethal moves. You had even arranged specialized training for capturing prisoners. And now the spearmen were showcasing the results in all their glory. The spearmen thrust their long spears forward, and as the spear shafts met the enemies, they gripped their spears with both hands, braced their feet, and used their waist to swing the spear shaft, knocking the enemy's spear aside. As the enemy's defenses crumbled, the spearmen extended their spears straight, aiming for the enemy's side, and then twisted their waists again, their bodies propelling the spear shaft, slamming it into the enemy's head or neck. With just 2 moves, they felled the enemy. Even if the fallen weren't knocked unconscious, they had no chance to resist. Several ragtag reinforcements rushed forward, pouncing on them and pinning them to the ground, tying them up securely. The Han tribe archers, even without their bows and arrows, were formidable. Their entrenching shovels were their secondary weapons. Lethal in close combat, short stick in the left hand, entrenching shovel in the right. The archers parried incoming spears with their sticks, and then, like axes, their right-hand entrenching shovels instantly chopped through the enemy's weapons. Then came the close-quarters assault, either using the shovel to smack heads or the stick to swing at necks. Their close-range combat power explosive. Some of the enemies were agile, like the leader of those 40, strong and nimble. His spear had long been chopped into pieces, but he somehow snatched a wooden club from someone, swinging it with ferocious force, preventing anyone from getting close. Hanyang, the centurion of the shield infantry, frowned. He knew it wasn't that his men were useless, but that they were remembering your orders to take prisoners alive. Otherwise, no matter how strong a person was, they would have been dead long ago against a swarm of soldiers. Hanyang raised his shield with one hand and held his knife with the other, launching a sideways shield charge. With a resounding thump, he sent the enemy leader flying. Taking advantage of the enemy's unsteady landing, he unleashed a backhand slash. A scream pierced the air as half an arm, still gripping the wooden club, soared into the sky. A fountain of blood erupting from the severed limb, Hanyang stood to the side, wielding his blood-stained waist knife, and with a sweep of the blade, shouted, "This man is the enemy leader. Kill him!" In the next second, a dozen shield infantrymen, witnessing their centurion's bravery, slicing off the enemy's arm with a single stroke, and knowing that they had received their knives without ever cutting a living soul, now received the order. Like opening a sheep pen and inviting hungry wolves to feast, they howled and pounced. *Theft, PFFT, PFFT, *, a dozen flashes of blades, and the cannibal tribe's valiant leader was hacked to pieces, limbs scattered on the ground. Hanyang walked over and with one slice severed the enemy chieftain's head, flinging it towards several remaining totem warriors who were still putting up a fight. The warriors were instantly petrified, and so were the ragtag reinforcements. Who had ever seen such a bloody scene, dismembering a person alive, no matter how brave they were, even if they dared to eat human flesh raw? They had never seen someone sliced into 8 pieces. Their weapons were too terrifying. The reinforcements from other tribes, let alone needing people, usually only poked a few holes in their prey with spears to bleed them out. They had never seen such powerful weapons, capable of chopping someone into pieces with a single blow. This gruesome scene stunned them into inaction, forgetting to resist, and they were immediately pinned to the ground by several Han tribe warriors, tied up securely. After battle statistics, the entire enemy squad of 42 men was annihilated. 5 killed and 37 captured, on the Han tribe side, thanks to the armored warriors leading the charge. There were no casualties, not even a minor injury. Although it was 200, plus a cavalry centurion ganging up on 40 people, this battle was fought beautifully, showcasing the military might of the Han tribe, their pride, and making the warriors aware of the power of the weapons in their hands. Boosting their confidence, it's also greatly boosted the morale of the allied forces. And even the ragtag reinforcements from other tribes realized that this battle didn't seem so difficult, and they were here to pick up the spoils. The battlefield was quickly cleaned up, the prisoners were taken away, and the corpses were buried in pits to prevent them from rotting in the hot weather and causing a plague. With the battle over, the same scene was playing out in other locations. Over 5 or 6 days, more and more reinforcements arrived, roaming the mountains and forests in small squads, led by the elite warriors of the Han tribe, achieving repeated victories and boosting morale. Some in the allied forces were even shouting slogans about a decisive battle at Hanyang City. You knew that now was not the time, you needed to wait. Wait for the allied forces to grow larger, wait for the enemy to make the right reaction. The enemy soon realized something was wrong. Some of the squad sent into the mountains to hunt hadn't returned for days. Even if they were chasing prey, where could they chase it to? As a result, the enemy's main camp outside Hanyang City began to go hungry. How could they fight without food? So they immediately sent more people into the mountains, both to hunt and to search for the missing men. A squad of 100 men, accompanied by 3 or 4 giant apes, prepared to investigate the secrets of the forest. After days of ambushes in the jungle, of the 200 plus enemy troops besieging Hanyang City, you had now captured over 300 and killed dozens more. Now, outside Hanyang City, the enemy had at most 800 troops left, and the number was still decreasing as they sent more squads of 100 men each into the mountains to search for the missing warriors. On the morning of April 8, you were drinking porridge at the camp south of Tuogu Ridge, the site of the first ambush against the Luo tribe. A Han tribe cavalryman, clad in armor, rode up and dismounted, Saluting, reporting. Chief, 2 enemy squads of 100 men have taken the bait and are advancing along our trail. Searching, they are expected to reach the encirclement by noon. What are your orders, Chief? You put down your bowl. How many giant apes in these 2 squads? The squad heading due south has 6. And the squad heading southwest has 5. Tell squad leader Shu that with so many allied troops this time, they should engage in close combat. The archer centurions should use ranged shots to snipe the giant apes, trying to kill these monsters first to reduce casualties. Also, to avoid the battle getting out of control. This time, no prisoners, safety first. If they're too difficult to capture, just kill them. You stood up, thought for a moment, and said. The cavalryman acknowledged the order and rode off. After breakfast, you walked around the camp. Over 300 prisoners were tied up, having been starved for days, half dead. Depriving them of food was the most effective way to control their resistance, rendering them weak. Besides, you didn't have food to spare. There was no need to waste it on them, as long as they didn't die of starvation. There were also dozens of wounded in the camp, mostly reinforcements from other tribes. Only 3 of the Han tribe warriors were injured. After fighting for days, 0 casualties were impossible. Fortunately, the Han tribe warriors had armor, and their injuries were not serious. The wounded from other tribes were in a worse state. Over 20 had died, and a dozen more had succumbed to their injuries. You had already sent a message via carrier pigeon to Hanyang City to request medicine, and you were saving those who could be saved. There were also 300 or 400 women and children, some from small tribes that had come to Hanyang City seeking refuge, and others were female warriors summoned by other tribes. You didn't let these women go to the battlefield. There were enough men. They temporarily worked at the camp, guarding prisoners and doing the logistical work of taking care of children and cooking. At noon, fighting broke out at the 2 designated ambush locations. The ambush sites were carefully chosen, all small, open areas without trees to prevent the giant apes from climbing trees and doubling their attack power. The tactics remained the same. Once the enemy entered the encirclement, seal it off. This time, there was a slight difference. Before the cavalry charged, there was a wave of ranged fire, with archers sniping the cannibal apes. Some of the giant apes were hit by 7 or 8 arrows and died on the spot, while others were hit by 1 or 2 arrows and continued to break through. When the giant apes charged to within 60 meters of the encirclement, the shield infantry had already formed a shield wall. To call it a shield wall wasn't an exaggeration. There weren't many Han tribe shield infantrymen, but they had captured a lot of the cannibal tribe's homemade shields over the past few days. Although they were crew, the reinforcements from other tribes, seeing how brave the Han tribe shield infantrymen were, had also taken a liking to shields. They didn't mind that the cannibal tribe's shields were inferior and happily carried them, learning from the Han tribe shield infantrymen, holding their shields and charging into battle. Behind the shield wall were the spearmen, their sharp, long spears resting on the shields, ensuring no one could break through the encirclement. Further back were countless reinforcements from other tribes, each holding 3 or 4 spears, watching the giant apes charge. Under the command of the Han tribe squad leaders, they threw their spears in unison, a rain of spears covering the apes. Several cannibal apes died completely before touching the shield wall. Needless to say, those many spears were also captured. After the giant apes were eliminated, things went as they had for the past few days. The cavalry was responsible for charging the enemy formation, disrupting it, and the spearmen and shield infantry took advantage of the chaos to charge and kill. Both battles were over in half an hour. After all, the Han tribe allied forces had 400 or 500 men against 100, with advantages in weapons, tactics, and the battlefield. It was a guaranteed win. After the battle, the troops began to clean up the battlefield. Some escorted the prisoners back to camp, while others dispersed to scout out the enemy's situation. It was already evening when the prisoners were escorted back to camp. There weren't many prisoners from this battle, about 120 people. Now, the enemy only had 600 troops left outside Hanyang City, and your allied forces had over 2,000. Each larger tribe contributed an average of 100 men. 17 or 18 tribes added up to more than 1,70 people, plus several smaller tribes that had come seeking refuge. The number exceeded 2,000 that night. You looked at the moon, calculated the date, and realized that in just over a week, the first crop of rice in Hanyang City would be ready for harvest. The farming season waits for no one. Tomorrow was the moment of the final battle. That night, you sent a message via carrier pigeon to Hanyang City, informing the city garrison to cooperate with the general offensive tomorrow, completely eliminating the invading enemy, and informing them of the specific plan early the next morning, leaving about 300 men to guard the camp and watch over the 430 prisoners. You led a force of over 1,900 men towards Hanyang City. Among them were 1.80 allied troops and over 100 elite warriors from the Han tribe. Departing before dawn, they marched until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. As they were about to exit the mountains, you ordered the troops to stop, eat the dry food prepared in the morning, rice and roasted meat. After resting for an hour, at 5 in the afternoon, they would emerge from the mountains from the southwest and southeast directions, forming a semi-encirclement, trapping the enemy west of Hanyang City. The garrison on Hanyang City's walls cheered upon seeing you arrive with a large force. After besieging the city for more than 10 days, you had finally appeared with the allied forces. It was early summer. 5 in the afternoon, still plenty of daylight. A small battle wouldn't take that long when you emerged from the woods with nearly 2,000 people. The enemies outside Hanyang City were stunned. Perhaps they finally understood why those warriors who went into the mountains to hunt never returned. The 200 men sent to search yesterday hadn't come back either. Seeing so many people emerging from the forest, it was obvious you were responsible, but they couldn't understand why these people would be their enemies. Until your army opened a path, and two dire elephants walked out from behind, with a man wearing a golden crown on the back of one of the elephants. That man was you. It's him. It's that person. Those are our elephants. The 2 we lost in the dark forest the year before last. Our squad was defeated then, and only 3 of us escaped. I didn't expect them to be captured by that man. A cannibal tribe warrior who had once attacked the tree tribe shouted loudly. A circular scar visible on his shoulder, where your arrow had struck him. Your arrow didn't have a head back then, so the injury wasn't serious, and he had fled wounded, even taking the arrow back to his tribe, which led to the events that followed. His shout didn't elicit much of a reaction. Whoever the person in front of them was, they were the enemy. Was discussing your identity necessary? The cannibals reacted quickly, seeing so many enemies appear. The person who seemed to be the leader shouted towards the east and north gates, gathering the warriors guarding the 4 city gates, concentrating them together to form a defensive formation outside the west gate. You didn't stop them. It would save you from having to scatter them later, making them harder to capture. After the remaining 600 totem warriors and 15 or 16 giant apes gathered at the west gate, the east gate quickly opened behind them, and about 1,500 Han tribe people poured out, men and women, wielding all sorts of weapons, early Han tribe bronze spears, copper shovels and iron spades, even axes and hoes, and even wooden sticks. After the 1,000+ people rushed out of the east gate, they immediately split into 2 groups, flanking from the north and south sides, trapping all the enemies in front of the west gate. The enemies were terrified, their faces ashen. They had besieged the city for days, but they didn't know how many people were inside. They must have been cursing inwardly. Why the hell didn't you come out sooner? With so many people, why did you have to shrink back inside the city? Now there are already so many of us, and you're running out to join the fun, forcing us onto a dead end. At that moment, the totem warriors were on the verge of tears. Their escape route was cut off. There was no way out, at this time, in front of the allied forces. Silhouetted against the setting sun, the Vice Commander Shoyo, riding on horseback, vigorously waved a huge military flag in his hand. The bright red military flag fluttered in the wind, signaling the general attack to the Hanyang City garrison. Dong, 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 dong. The war drums on the city tower rumbled, with a flurry of noise. Many figures suddenly appeared at the arrow slits of the west city wall, early Han tribe female archers, and some archers trained later. totaling no less than 100 people, and a large number of ordinary tribesmen. Even adult members of the snake tribe appeared on the city wall. You ordered Shoya to change the flag-waving pattern, and the drum sound from the west city wall immediately stopped. In the next moment, hundreds of arrows flew directly towards the dozen giant apes below the city wall, preparing to kill these fearsome monsters first, and to ensure the kill. The arrowheads were tipped with the anesthetic mushrooms collected from the Gu tribe. Theft, theft, theft. The sound of arrows entering flesh rang out. Half of the dozen giant apes quickly fell, and the rest hastily tried to escape. They couldn't attack the people on the city wall. They had tried several times in the past few days, so they could only escape outwards, but outside was a 2-0 strong encirclement. Your arrows and javelins rained down, and the cannibal apes were wiped out in the blink of an eye. The remaining totem warriors panicked even more and began to retreat frequently, quickly retreating to the moat outside the west gate, with nowhere to go. However, some cowardly warriors jumped directly into the river to escape, wanting to swim out of the encirclement along the moat. But at this moment, the archers on the city wall unleashed their power again, shooting straight down into the moat, killing all the enemies trying to escape on the spot. The other tribesmen who didn't have bows and arrows threw the stones they had saved these days down in one go, directly smashing into the enemy ranks below the west city wall. Under this barrage of stones, many people in the enemy ranks were instantly hit. It wasn't that they didn't want to dodge, but that there were their own people in front of and behind them, so crowded that there was no place to escape. Pushed by more people, the crowd was forced to move forward, away from the range of the flying stones from the city wall, which suited your intentions perfectly. The enemy's forward movement left space at the entrance to the west gate. The war drums rumbled again, and in the inspiring drum sound, the drawbridge of the west gate was quickly lowered, and the two vermilion red gates inside opened simultaneously, revealing the cavalry that had been lined up inside. Seeing the city gate open, why, to be honest, those totem warriors originally wanted to risk their lives to break into the city, thinking there might be a chance of survival, but instead, they saw the city gate blocked tightly by many tall quadrupeds. Then they saw the big flag waved from your side, in the west, and someone seemed to shout something. In the next moment, your cavalry centurion, Chai Duodwo, led his cavalry towards the enemy ranks, each with 2 horses, 38 warriors, 76 horses, charging forward bravely. At the same time, over 100 riders also poured out of the west gate, also mixed with over 200 riderless cattle, following the team and charging out. The head-on collision of hundreds of beasts immediately frightened the enemy's eyeballs out. They ran to both sides desperately, hoping to avoid being trampled to death under the hooves of the herd. Although the cavalry charge was an old tactic, it was effective. The 600 enemies quickly scattered, dodging the impact of the herd, and the enemy's formation was thrown into chaos. At this moment, you drew the long sword from your waist, pointed it forward heroically, and shouted loudly, "Warriors, charge! Annihilate them all! Charge!" Roar, roar, roar. The series of victories had made the Han tribe allied forces' morale soar. At this time, it was still more people against fewer, 3-0+ people ganging up on 600 enemy troops. They also had over 100 cavalry leading the charge, scattering the enemy army. This would give the allied army an advantage by using more troops against fewer ones. With your long sword pointing forward, the 3-0+ troops pressed forward in an instant. The warriors shouted loudly to boost morale, and the series of battles had also given them a lot of combat experience. They quickly overwhelmed all the enemy troops, clashing with them in close combat. With you personally directing the battle, Shudai and Zutiyu naturally didn't need to stay in the rear to oversee things. Only Shoya, responsible for waving the flag and issuing orders, stayed by your side. Shudai and Zutiyu, the 2 positive and negative squad leaders, also took the lead in leading their teams into battle, rushing to the front. Chudie's weapon was a 2-handed straight-bladed saber crafted along with your Tianzi knew. He didn't use a shield, but used the black ironwood scabbard in his left hand as a club, occasionally parrying the spears that were thrust at him. His right-hand saber was used to chop with all his might. Although he wasn't chopping people, he could chop off the long weapons in their hands. depriving them of the ability to counterattack. Making it easier for the allied troops around him to attack, Zhu Tiyu couldn't get used to spears. Nor was he comfortable with sabers or Yanling swords, since joining the Han tribe a year ago. This guy had always been inseparable from his black long club. His fighting style was still very open and powerful, capable of smashing people's brains out with a single blow. Today, in order to capture more prisoners alive, he seemed to be holding back somewhat, but that didn't hinder his terrifying output. The club was wielded so tightly that no wind could escape it, and wherever he passed, enemies were knocked to the ground, either directly unconscious or so despairing that they threw down their weapons and surrendered. Dolly, who came out of the city, also had his own unique weapon. He was one of the earliest veterans of the Han tribe, loyal to the Han tribe. And you also intended to promote him last year. You had him lead the team responsible for iron ore mining, and now you had given him his own exclusive weapon. Dolly, like his name, was born with great strength. He had previously been good at using short clubs. Later, when ironware became available, you also had the workshop custom make him a pair of iron jian, similar to the weapons of Qin Qiong of the Sui and Tang dynasties. The iron jian was narrow in the front and wide in the back, with a quadrangular prism shape. Every 10 centimeters around the body was a raised eve, and the tip of the jian had a short cone that could be used for stabbing. The whole iron jian, standing there, looked like a pagoda. This weapon was a blunt instrument, unlike swords which killed with their edge. It relied on brute force and whipping blows, charging into the enemy ranks. Each swing of the jian would easily smash the enemy's crude shields, even if it didn't shatter the shield. The impact would send the enemy staggering backward, landing on their ass. Zhuer, that guy, used to use a forked spear made from an animal's leg bone. Now he'd switched to iron, wielding to half-meter long, 3-edged qianqi. But those weapons were too lethal, killing people instantly. This time, wanting to capture more prisoners, he kept the 2 qianqi hanging at his waist and didn't draw them. Instead, he grabbed an iron shovel from the city, the kind used for labor, and charged out, slapping and hacking at the enemies, keeping them easily at bay. Shaoya rode his horse beside you. As an original member of the Han tribe, now holding the position of Gusaima, in charge of army logistics and discipline, he naturally had his own signature weapons. He originally used a tiger teeth, but now he had switched to 2 double-edged short swords. Additionally, due to his special position, he carried a nearly 2-meter-long leather whip at his waist, woven entirely from antelope hide. It cracked loudly when swung and could leave welts that would break the skin. However, this time he was following you, carrying the flag, watching the battle unfold in front of him. He was just as much a hot-blooded youth, but he couldn't charge into the fray. He felt somewhat frustrated, but he didn't say anything. He was one of the older members of the original Han tribe, 21 years old this year, calm and collected, never panicking in the face of adversity. He was intelligent and steady. Otherwise you wouldn't have given him the position of Gusaima. Shaoya, what do you think of this battle? You weren't on the battlefield yourself, but observing the overall situation from the rear. Seeing that he looked a bit bored, you started a conversation with him, wanting to hear his thoughts. After all, you were grooming him to be your strategist. What aspect is the chief asking about? Shaoya asked, drawing his gaze from the battlefield. Considering your question for a moment, this guy seemed good at thinking, full of ideas, proceeding from the simple to the complex. Just say whatever comes to mind. You said directly, yes, chief. Your plan is thorough, your tactics are sound, and every step is meticulously arranged. We have superior numbers. Our forces outnumber the enemy several times over, and our weapons and equipment are also superior. This battle is a foregone conclusion, a guaranteed victory. However, this subordinate suspects that we wouldn't need so many people to win against these 600 enemies. The chief's decision to mobilize the entire tribe's fighting force is also meant to be a show of force, but not to intimidate the enemy, but to intimidate the allied forces, to demonstrate the Han tribe's military might to them. Shaoya stated, oh, then tell me, what's the use of doing that? You didn't refute him, tacitly agreeing, and then tested him on the deeper purpose. The chief summoned the allied forces this time. using white salt to exchange for prisoners, which has already brought many benefits to the various tribes. At the same time, these consecutive days of fighting have also made the leaders of the allied forces aware of the advantage of uniting their forces. If someone among them harbors ambitions, they might do something similar, gathering the allied forces to do something detrimental to us. But this battle, the fighting force we ourselves have mobilized, is no less than the number of the allied forces. Our weapons and equipment are even secretly regarded as divine weapons by them. And our warriors fight bravely on the battlefield, which will probably leave a deep impression on them. This also indirectly tells them a message, even if they really unite. They are no match for the Han tribe. Shaoya finished speaking and looked at you, waiting for your evaluation, to see if his thoughts were correct. Well, that's one aspect of it, and I did intend to intimidate them. But our initial purpose in gathering the allied forces this time was to absorb them all. Like you said, these enemies are indeed powerful. But it's not like we can't beat them, so why bother having the other tribes join in the fun? It's to let them see the enemy's strength, to let them understand how terrible the enemy is. And now they've also been drawn into this war, but they don't have the Han tribe's ability to resist foreign enemies. If they want to protect themselves, they'll ultimately have to rely on the Han tribe's protection. This lays the groundwork for them to join the Han tribe. Besides, although our army hasn't been established for long, it has everything it needs and can be considered luxuriously equipped. Even our own tribesmen aren't fully equipped yet. Just take what you said. Many of the allied tribes' reinforcements are secretly discussing our weapons as divine weapons. And they are all hot-blooded young men. If you were one of those tribes' reinforcements, if you saw such divine weapons, if you had the opportunity to obtain them, wouldn't you want to? You looked at Shaoya with a faint smile. Shaoya smiled knowingly when he heard you say that. Was there even a question? If he had the chance to get them, he would definitely fight tooth and nail for the opportunity. Only a fool would give it up. It's like a mortal having a chance to ascend to immortality. Munstep, who could resist that kind of temptation?